It is an honor, a privilege, and a pleasure to be here with you today. We'll do a sound check real quick. Make sure you guys can hear me out there. Can you hear me in YouTube land? I see some hearts going up. I see some peeps here that I see. Papa Doo and Brian and Coach Christina's in the house. Thank y'all for being here. See, let's see, we got 139 folks here now. That's great. Love it. So yeah, just do a little sound check here. Can you hear me out there? Everybody hear me? Let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Got some hearts going there. Yes, thank you, Kelly. Thank you. It's good to see you, Kelly. I hope you're doing great. It is going to be a fun-filled session today. Lots of information, but more importantly, actionable steps here. So Jennifer's here, Julie's here. Hello, Melanie, Judy. Good to see y'all. Coach Tim here. Coach Christina is running the show and the chat. So she'll be making sure you're all taken care of. Karen, Michelle. Hello, Michelle. Good to see you. Thank you, Coach Christina, for letting me know that you can hear me. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be here with you. Melinda's here. Russ is here. Lots of thumbs up. David, Sean. Hello, hello, hello. Tony, coming from New Jersey. Dustin, Clyde. Coach Tim here from Austin, Texas. Coach Christina is in the audience walking around with the figurative microphone to make sure that all questions are heard, because we're going to get to those today. But as you probably already know, the topic at hand today is metabolism. So we're going to give people a few moments to get in here, give you set the table here, give you a little primer on what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to cover. Most importantly, I want you to walk away with actionable steps that you can implement right away to boost that sluggish metabolism, to combat weight gain, to help you with your weight loss efforts, so on and so forth, because it does get more and more challenging as we get older. But as I want to really hammer home today, that this so-called age-related decline in metabolism is just as much, if not more, lifestyle related, which puts control back in our hands than it is age related. Okay, so we're gonna dig into all this. In fact, we're gonna dig into what metabolism really is, how it works. Hey David, thank you for saying hello. George, Chris, Michelle, Kim, Lynn, want to make sure you give a shout out for being here. Thank you guys for taking time out of your day to join me. I want to make sure this is worth your while. We've got Coach Christina in the audience, high-fiving, giving hugs, hand pounds, and giving the microphone to make sure that everyone's questions and voices are heard. We're going to take care of you. Dustin, great question. We're not going to be able to get into medical related questions today. It's beyond my technical expertise for one, and two, to dig into your health history and all those questions would take well more time than we have today. So I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. Not going to be able to answer any medical related questions today, but we'll cover, we should still be able to cover plenty of ground, plenty of actionable steps that you can take, answer questions about BioTRUST products that may be relevant to our discussion. So we'll make sure that you guys are taken care of, no problem. This is going to be posted when we're all done, all said and done. So if you don't have, you're not able to stick around the whole time, well, it'll be there for you at the end. So it'll be here, all right? And if you're just joining, we're only a couple minutes into it, just kind of priming the pump, so to speak here, getting to say hello and kind of setting the table for what we're going to be talking about. Big Daddy, loving Keto Elevate, that's awesome. George from Kentucky, good question about the keto. I think it's the keto diet. Yes, keto diet can work. Is it the diet for everyone? No, it's not. There's no one size fits all, but it can be helpful. My opinion on that, George, is that there may be certainly may be benefits for elevated ketones for various reasons. But from a weight management standpoint, those ketones might have appetite suppressing benefits. But from a weight management standpoint, I think that the keto diet is not dissimilar from a lot of other diets out there, in the sense that it helps set boundaries and it helps us stick within a set of rules. Even proponents of the keto diet will talk about how it's the limited selection of foods that can help control calories. So there's a number of different ways that we can control our caloric intake. We can restrict certain food groups, we can restrict time, we can restrict calories. And keto diet, of course, does it through restriction of certain categories of foods. And it does it quite well in many cases if you can stick to it. It's not for everybody, but it can be helpful. So good question, George. I hope that helps. Oh, Laura says she's in her 60s, metabolism slowed down, can't exercise sensitive. So good. Well, that's what we're here for, Laura. There's still some things that we can do. Andrea said, hey Andrea, good to see you here. When's the best time to take MetaboBoost? Ageless muscle. Okay, let's put those questions in our pocket. We want to come back to those. That's a great question. So let's get into the topic at hand today, and that is metabolism. All right. We want to make sure that we cover a few things here. I've got notes. I've got lots of notes here because I want to make sure that we cover all these things. We want to cover metabolism. What is it and how does it work? Right? What is its impact on weight and health, metabolism? Can we do anything to speed it up? Are there any actionable steps that we can take? Okay, so these are some of the things that we want to get into as we go along. So please put your questions in as we go. We'll try to get to some if they're relevant during the discussion. If not, we'll get to as many as possible afterwards. Coach Christina, I think you're going to help me out here and try to put those questions in your pocket so that we can regurgitate them. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but anyway, repeat them at the end as we get to the Q&A toward the end of the session. Okay, so we're going to try to knock this out, talk about metabolism, give you some actionable steps. 10-4, thank you very much. And then we'll get into some questions. Sound good? Sound good. Okay. All right, so speaking of Coach Christina and I, one of the most common questions we get goes something along these lines, like, my metabolism is so slow. What can I do to boost my sluggish metabolism? Or, as I've gotten older, it's getting harder and harder to lose weight, even though I'm doing everything right, you know? And all of these types of questions, another variation is, the pounds keep creeping on as I'm getting older. I don't know what to do, even though I'm doing everything right. Diet and exercise just don't cut it. This idea of the sluggish metabolism, what can I do to boost my metabolism? Really comes down to this whole metabolism thing. People struggle with metabolism as they get a little bit older. And to be honest with you, it gets harder and harder to not only lose weight, but even maintain a healthy weight as we get older. Not only harder to play offense, that's the losing weight piece, but also to play defense to maintain your weight. And even if you are able to maintain your weight, you might even notice that, you don't feel the same at that 150 pounds that you once did. Like, the composition of that weight is changing over time, right? And so, while there are many factors at play here, the elephant in the room is metabolism. It's like the favorite 10-letter word of fitness and health, right? Metabolism. And so it's true, like, we see this consistent, this predictable, and this persistent decline in metabolic rate as we get older. In fact, it starts around the age of 20. We tend to see a decline in metabolic rate every decade starting in your 20s, and it gets precipitously slower and slower. The percentage-wise, it's about 2 to 4% each decade after the age of 20. From a number standpoint, that probably adds up to about 150 to 200 calories per decade. So when you're 20, if you're burning 2,000 calories a day, in your 30s, it's about 1,800. In your 40s, 1,600. In your 50s, and so on. Now, I'm just giving some numbers to show examples here, but it generally kind of falls in that line that we see about a 2 to 4% decline in metabolic rate each decade after the age of 20, and it adds up to about, or subtracts up to about 150 to 200 calories per day per decade. And so you can kind of figure that out, that yeah, it does get harder to manage your weight because essentially you're burning fewer calories. Now, when we talk about metabolism, we're talking about a number of different things here. So for our conversation, what we're probably talking about is total daily energy expenditure, or the number of calories that we burn each day, okay? And so we can think of metabolism as this engine inside your body. So I'm gonna just read this definition that I wrote down. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty good, right? Metabolism is like the engine inside your body that turns the food you eat into the energy you need to do everything, from breathing and thinking to running and playing. It keeps all the important parts of your body working properly, just like how a car engine keeps the car running. So that's pretty cool, right? That kind of tells you what metabolism does. It helps your body create this energy, turn food into energy. But like I said, more commonly, when we talk about metabolism, we're actually referring to like how many calories we burn each day, or what's actually scientifically known as total daily energy expenditure. From that side of the coin, I wrote a slightly different definition, and that is the word metabolism is often used to describe total daily energy expenditure, which is the total amount of calories your body burns each day to keep you alive and active. This includes the energy used for basic functions like breathing and digestion, as well as physical activities like walking and exercising. So, for the sake of today's conversation, we're going to use that latter definition, right? Where we're referring to metabolism as the total number of calories that we're burning each day. That's what I feel like people are asking for, or talking about when they say, my metabolism is sluggish. What can I do to boost it? You want to know, like, what can you do to boost the number of calories that you're burning each day? Because essentially, this is important to you because you're struggling with your weight, or you're struggling with your weight loss efforts, things like that. The reason you want to burn more calories is because you want to make it easier to lose weight, right? Am I right? I think so. Now, when we talk about metabolism, again, I want to come back to something I mentioned in case you're just joining us. So it does become more difficult for a number of reasons for people to not only maintain weight but lose weight as they get older. And there is this very predictable, very well documented age-related decrease in total daily energy expenditure, or what we're talking about today is metabolism, age-related decline in metabolism. And it goes something like a 2 to 4% decline in metabolic rate each decade after the age of 20. And that adds up to about 150 to 200 calories. So you were burning 2,000 calories when you're 20, 1,800 calories when you're 30, 1,600 calories when you're 40, and so on down the line. Just putting some numbers out there. It's a little bit of theoretical, but just so you get the point, that's the direction that we're heading. Directionally, that's where we're going. And like I said, it's considered age-related because we see that in a predictable fashion in this downward slope. But as I want to get to today, and I want to hammer this point home, is that it's much more lifestyle related. How is it lifestyle related? Or how is the control in your hands? Let's get into that. So metabolism, or total daily energy expenditure, is actually made up of several different components. The first and the biggest component of metabolism, or total daily energy expenditure, is what's known as basal metabolic rate or resting metabolic rate. Okay, those two terms aren't exactly the same, but for our purposes, we're going to use them interchangeably. And just so you know, that basal metabolic rate, or that resting metabolic rate, accounts for 50 to 70% of your metabolic rate, your total daily energy expenditure. And it's essentially the number of calories your body burns to keep you alive while you're at rest, doing nothing at all. It's like the energy you need to breathe, pump blood, and keep your organs working when you're not moving around, okay? So that's basal metabolic rate, or resting metabolic rate. It makes up 50 to 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. Huge chunk. Second component of total daily energy expenditure is physical activity. And physical activity can further be broken down into two categories: planned exercise and non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, or NEAT for short. And we're going to dig into this one in just a second. Hey, Jamal, good to see you. Thank you for being here. Physical activity accounts for somewhere between 20 and 30% of your total daily energy expenditure, okay? We're going to get into that a little bit more. Again, physical activity is made up of two components. You have planned exercise activity and non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, which we're going to get into in just a moment. The third and final component, for just a moment. The third and final component of metabolism, or total daily energy expenditure, is, real quick, Audrey, hello Audrey, said 68, so I'm down about 1,400 calories. Well, that, Audrey, I put out some numbers there just so people could get a sense for the direction that metabolic rate is heading. I can't say for sure that everyone is going in that same bucket per se, but in general, it's that 150 to 200 calories per day per decade. So I'm not trying to prescribe any kind of caloric, just not trying to prescribe any kind of caloric intake or caloric boundaries you should be within. The best way to determine where you're at is to, and I'm sorry to sidetrack here, but it's an important point here, and I'm glad that you called me out on that, is that the best way to determine what your maintenance needs are right now is to log your nutrition, to measure your food intake, to use a nutrient database just for a period of a couple weeks to determine, and log your weight accordingly. And if your weight is staying consistent, then that's probably your maintenance level. Now, there might be someone who's 68 that burns 2,000 calories a day. There might be someone who's 68 and burns 1,200 calories a day. So I gave some very theoretical, I put some numbers out there, gave some theoretical examples just to give you a sense for the direction that's headed. That's not to say that everyone, again, in their 60s is going to be at 1,400 calories or 1,200 calories, but directionally that's the way that we're going. So I hope that's helpful. And again, the best way to determine where you're at is to log things. I don't think you have to track your food and measure your food every day for the rest of your life. But if you really want to know where you're at, you do that along with measuring your weight. And if your weight stays consistent, that's probably a pretty close ballpark to maintenance level caloric intake. But like we talked about, or like we're about to talk about, we have a much greater influence on energy expenditure than we might think. Okay, so the third and final piece of total daily energy expenditure, or metabolic rate, is called the thermic effect of feeding. And so essentially, this is the number of calories that your body burns to process the food that you eat. So, digestion, absorption, assimilation of nutrients from food actually is an energy consuming process. Okay, and we're going to get into that a little bit more as well. That generally makes up about 10 to 15% of your total daily energy expenditure. Now, these are all levers that you can actually pull on to some degree or another as we get older. And the first lever that I want to talk about is the physical activity lever. That's the longest lever that we can pull on. It has the biggest impact in more ways than one, okay? So physical activity is something that we generally see a decline with an age, right? So both in terms of planned exercise, and that's the amount of exercise that we do, as well as the intensity of exercise, and NEAT. So in other words, we're just more sedentary as we get older. We're sitting in a car, we're sitting at a desk, we're sitting on the couch, the chair, so on and so forth. A lot more sitting as we get older. And again, even folks, generally we're exercising less. And even folks who do exercise as they get older, they tend to not exercise as much, and they don't exercise as intensely. And that adds up to having a significant impact on metabolic rate, a decline in metabolic rate. It's actually going to be in more ways than one in just a moment, as we'll get to, okay? So physical activity is going to be the biggest lever that we can pull to combating this age-related decline in metabolism, to boosting a sluggish metabolism, okay? So let's jot that down as our first note, physical activity. Now we're going to peel back the layers a bit. And this is where I want to go back to. So is it really age-related or is it lifestyle-related? I mean, the sedentary lifestyle is an underpinning factor of this age-related decline in metabolic rate. Okay, so I'm hammering it. I'm sorry, I'm very, very repetitive. I have kids. I have to repeat the same thing over and over and over again because we have to practice and practice and practice. We have to hear things many times over and over and over again in order to really embrace them, absorb them, and then ultimately apply them, okay? So physical activity is a double-edged sword here because on one hand, not only are we burning calories during the activity, so that's the contributing to the total daily energy expenditure. If I'm out exercising, for instance, for 30, 60 minutes, I'm burning more calories than I would be if I'm sitting behind a computer for 30, 60 minutes. So I'm automatically, quote unquote, boosting my metabolism by going ahead and doing exercise. Now, you also, if you watched our last YouTube live, we talked a lot about age-related muscle loss. So not just, today we're talking about age-related metabolism slowing down, or slow down, but last time we talked about age-related muscle loss. And that age-related muscle loss closely parallels the age-related decline in metabolic rate. So we see somewhere between a 3 and 8% decline in muscle each decade after the age of 30. And again, we're talking about a 2 to 4% decline in metabolic rate each decade after the age of 20, right? Very close. These are parallel lines. Now, basal metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate, we've already talked about how physical activity declines with age. Basal metabolic rate, resting metabolic rate also declines with age to the tune of about 2% each decade. So it's it's about half of what we see in the total daily energy expenditure. Okay, so that like basal metabolic rate, that's the all the energy it takes to just like sustain life essentially, is declining by about 2%. You want to know the biggest factor for that decline, the biggest underpinning factor for that decline in basal metabolic rate? I'll give you a guess. Muscle loss, age-related muscle loss. Muscle is very metabolically active. So as we lose muscle, our basal metabolic rate slows down, our resting metabolic rate slows down. That very metabolically active tissue we no longer have to maintain. So our basal metabolic rate slows down. So now, what are the best tools in the toolbox for us to maintain our muscle mass as we get older? Not a rhetorical question if you know the answer. The two biggest tools in the toolbox to maintain our muscle mass as we get older. Anyone know? Let's see. Okay, so I'm sure that you're all thinking, it's on the tip of your tongue, resistance training for your exercise component. It's one tool. And then nutrition. So really your two tools are exercise and nutrition. More specifically, your tool for exercise is going to be resistance training. You can also call that strength training. Oh, I see a protein. Got it. Catholic Warrior Princess said weight train. Got it. Give those guys a prize. Give them a prize. Would you? Protein and weights. Brian's got it. Love it. You guys are on top of it. We got to get you guys a little prize here today. So exercise, more specifically resistance training, also known as weight training or strength training, basically lifting weights, something to stimulate the muscles, right? That's going to be the strongest tool for the job. Protein intake, Larry's got it. Love it. See some other comments there. It's great. Love that. I love it that there's participation there. Michelle's got it. And the other tool in the toolbox is nutrition, okay? More specifically, on the nutrition side, there's a few things. A few people already said, Larry, optimizing your protein intake, okay? We'll get into what that looks like in just a moment, but optimizing your protein intake and targeted supplementation. So from a supplementation standpoint, Melinda's got it, Aegis Muscle. We want to use whey protein, right? We want to use HMB. We want to use creatine. We want to use vitamin D. We want to use omega-3s. So some of my favorite products to help with maintaining muscle, BioTRUST Low Carb or BioTRUST Low Carb Light. This is my new favorite one, salted caramel. We want to use Aegis Muscle right here, this bad boy right here, right? That's the creatine, the HMB. There's some vitamin D in there too. Most people need a little bit more vitamin D. Souljoy is a great choice for the job there. For omega-3s, omega-3s do so much, including help us maintain muscle. Omega krill is my choice there, okay? So just touching on the supplement piece there a little bit. We're going to get a little bit more into the protein in just a second. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact here that what I'm talking about right now, application-wise, is to boost a sluggish metabolism. Is a foundational factor there is to maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass as we get older. Resistance training, and then the supplementation that I mentioned, okay? So in terms of protein intake, 0.7 grams per pound of 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight per day is kind of like I'd say your floor. We can go higher, no problem. So 0.7 grams. If you're 150 pounds, shoot for at least 100 grams of protein a day. If you're 180 pounds, shoot for at least 125 grams of protein a day. If you're 200 pounds, shoot for at least 150 grams of protein. Pretty easy targets there. Not easy to achieve, but pretty easy to remember. That's where the protein supplement comes into play. Bonnie, I'm with you right there. Salted caramel, here it is. Delicious, okay? So that's where the protein comes in. So we need the protein to help maintain the muscle. Ageless muscle, awesome right here. It's working in a slightly different way to help maintain the muscle. Jamel, you're asking about ageless muscle. I highly recommend, today we're talking about metabolism, so I'm just gonna briefly touch on it. If you have any questions about age-related muscle loss or ageless muscle, please go to the last live that we did last month. You get an hour-long talk about ageless muscle, age-related muscle, all that good stuff, okay? Let's see. So, resistance training, right? That's most important. One thing I want to mention about resistance training is it's the cornerstone of boosting metabolism, right? So it's for a number of reasons, right? Number one, you're burning calories during that activity, right? So you've got that piece of it. Secondly, there is a slight, albeit meaningful, increase in metabolic rate after the activity. This is what some people refer to as afterburn, right? I think afterburn is way overstated out there, okay? And there's a number of people who may proliferate that, but it's meaningful, and you're putting some change in your pocket, so to speak, okay? So it's not negligible, but it's not going to be this game changer that does it all. But when we're talking about boosting a sluggish metabolism, every penny you got in your pocket is going to help, okay? So resistance training, on one hand, it's going to burn calories during the activity. You're going to burn a few more calories after the activity. And third, over the long haul, it's going to help you maintain or even build that muscle mass, which is going to have that big long-term effect on your basal metabolic rate or your resting metabolic rate. Okay, so this is a three-headed monster. Resistance training is, or maintaining muscle mass more specifically is, in terms of boosting muscle. It's the cornerstone. It's the foundation for maintaining a healthy metabolism, for boosting a sluggish metabolism. Also, on the exercise side of things, don't take that as me saying don't do cardio. Okay, that's not at all what I'm saying. I think that your aerobic piece is an important component for an overall fitness program, and that's low, medium, and high intensity aerobic training. If you can do all those, great. They all have their place. They burn calories during the activity. High intensity interval training may even burn a few calories, have a little bit of that afterburn effect. For a given amount of time, you're going to burn more calories the higher intensity you go. So all those things have their place. But from a biggest bang for your buck, resistance training, and then high intensity interval training is going to have a big bang for your buck too, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that low and moderate intensity aerobic training doesn't have a piece, because you can, or have their place, because they do increase total daily energy expenditure through burning more calories, okay? Now, one thing that I want to come back to on the protein intake is, one thing I didn't mention there is going back to the thermic effect of feeding, okay? Going back to thermic effect of feeding. Yeah, Brian, by the way, Brian, you're doing a great job when you're running. I think it's awesome. What you might do, Brian, at some point is, because running itself is not going to have any meaningful impact on maintaining muscle mass. It's great, it's burning calories, awesome for your conditioning, your metabolic health, and things like that. It's not having any effect on maintaining muscle mass. So at some point, you might add some resistance training. At some point, you might also incorporate some intervals into your running as well. For now, just keep building that base. You're doing an awesome job. Just keep also being consistent, because now you're used to doing it. You're used to dedicating that time. So there's tremendous value in just doing your running for now. And we can talk about what that looks like in the future for, adding maybe one of those days that you're running, actually making it a resistance training, or baking in some resistance training into it, or separately, or doing some intervals, something like that. Okay, so keep it up for now. All right. Back to the thermic effect of feeding. So we talked about this other third component of metabolic rate, which is the thermic effect of feeding. This is the calories your body burns to actually process, digest, absorb, assimilate the food that you eat, okay? The thermic effect of feeding for protein is significantly higher for that than that of fat or carbs, right? And what I mean by that is like your body burns about 20 to 30% of the calories you consume from protein just to process it. That percentage is somewhere like maybe 10% for carbs, or 5 to 10% for carbs, or 0 to 3% for fat. So what does all that mean? It means that by consuming more protein and preferentially replacing some of the carbs and fats, you actually can increase your metabolism, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 10%, depending on what you're replacing. So protein, the thermic effect of feeding for protein is 2 to 3 times higher than carbs. The thermic effect of feeding for protein is about 10 times higher for protein than fat. Okay, so Larry, you're doing a great job here in the chat. I see you making some suggestions. Timing of protein intake can be relevant. For most people, a good place to start is just going to make sure that you're getting enough. And then as you consistently get enough protein, then we might go into the timing. That's not to say that timing is not important, but most people just need to worry about getting enough first and then go from there. And you're saying, Larry, 1 gram of protein per kilo. I'd probably bump it up a little bit more based on the research that I've seen. It's close, but 0.7 grams per pound is what I'm thinking, which is a little bit more than, I think it's about 1.2 grams per kilo. So great comments there, Larry. You're being super helpful. Thank you so much in the chat. Okay, so I just wanted to go into the thermic effect of feeding for a moment. Now, back to the exercise component that I wanted to mention here. So planned exercise, awesome. Everyone should have planned exercise in their routine. David, you said, how much protein do I need at the age of 52? At 52, that's going to be that 0.7 grams per pound of body weight per day. So David, I don't know how much you weigh, but let's say you're at, Larry, high five, buddy. Let's say you're at 180 pounds. Your minimum, your floor is going to be 120. Oh, Coach Christina's all over it. 125 grams. If you're closer to 200 pounds, shoot for 150 grams. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 0.7 grams per pound of body weight per day is a good target for protein intake. Actually need more protein as we get older. BioTRUST low carb, BioTRUST low carb light, those are great options. They have enzymes in there that help us utilize the protein better. And I would also, highly recommend my good friend up here, Ageless Muscle, which works through different pathways than protein. Okay, so on exercise, planned exercise is great. I'd love for everyone to be doing 30 to 60 minutes of some kind of planned exercise, if not every day, most days of the week. But here's the deal, guys. That 30 to 60 minutes of exercise each day is not enough to combat an otherwise sedentary lifestyle in terms of overall health, but also to help boost this sluggish metabolism. Okay, so it's a step in the right direction. More work to do. Okay, people often recommend exercise snacks, baking in exercise snacks throughout the day. What are exercise snacks? Is it just something funny we talk about? No, it just simply means like short, brief little exercise sessions. Could be 1 to 2 minutes throughout the day. Could be 5 minutes. Could be a 10-minute walk. Just smaller movement sessions. The shorter they are, the more intense they should be, right? This could be doing some burpees for a minute, jumping jacks, going up and down the stairs, running in place, mountain climbers. If you have an exercise bike, doing a little sprint, rowing, whatever, something like that. To just, thank you, Teresa. Appreciate you. We love our community and all of our customers. You guys are awesome. So exercise snacks, breaking up the day, adding a little bit more activity is only going to be helpful for boosting the sluggish metabolism, only going to be helpful for metabolic health, such as, insulin sensitivity, blood glucose management, things like that, okay? So, Kelly says that she sets a timer to include those exercise snacks throughout the day. That is fantastic. I love that idea, Kelly. And as you do that more and more often, the stuff becomes habit, okay? All right, so not only do we have planned exercise, but we're also going to bake in exercise snacks. I'm going to recap all this, guys, so don't worry. Hopefully you're taking notes, but you don't need to. I'm not that big of a deal that you need to take notes on what I say. We'll make sure you walk away with this well-equipped, okay? Now, before we close the book on exercise or physical activity, I want to come back to NEAT. That's that non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So I wrote down definition of NEAT so that I can be very clear with it. NEAT comprises the energy your body uses for all the little activities you do throughout the day that aren't exercise. This includes things like walking around the house, fidgeting, cleaning, or even standing up and sitting down. So while NEAT is different than exercise snacking, by definition it's spontaneous, it might take some initial thought or mindfulness to increase this component of metabolism, but I think it's worth it. Andrew's taking notes. I love it. Thank you. So NEAT is very important, and just adding in more of this non-exercise activity throughout the day is super, super helpful to boosting metabolism. There was a researcher named James Levine who did a study, and he looked at, the study design cracks me up, but basically took a group of people. Some people had a tendency to be more lean, some people had a tendency to be more overweight. And what they did was they overfed these folks. They overfed this group of people. And then they had an activity sensor on them. What makes me laugh is like they didn't have this ring on them like that tracks activity. What they did was they put underwear on them that tracked activity, which is funny. It's really funny to me. But anyhow, so they tracked their activity and they overfed them for a period of, I believe it was 2 weeks. It was like 2 to 4 weeks. It doesn't really matter. But the point of this was that they noticed that some people had a propensity to gain weight during that time period. And even though they were way over consuming how many calories they would normally need, there was a group of people who didn't gain any weight at all. And what they found was that the people who didn't gain weight had higher NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. They just fidgeted more, they got up and moved around. They just naturally did that, okay? So, Dr. Levine and his colleagues continue down this path. You can look them up and search NEAT, and you can find more research on the topic. And they found that this NEAT was what they called the hidden tiger, the crouching tiger, hidden dragon of weight. Oh my gosh, the crouching tiger, hidden dragon of weight loss, because it was this like untapped area that could be highly beneficial for boosting a sluggish metabolism. Now, again, by nature, NEAT should be spontaneous. You shouldn't be putting thought into it, things like that. But, it might take some initial thought. And initially, you might even consider exercise snacks in that same vein, because I think that there's some planning that goes around that. You're just trying to bake in some spontaneous activity throughout the day. So I don't care if it's NEAT or if it's exercise snacking or if it's spontaneous, what it is. What I'm saying is that the more active that you can be, the better off you're gonna be in terms of boosting the sluggish metabolism. This might also entail moving to a standing desk or getting up and taking any kind of work calls while you're standing, right? And so, again, a little bit of thought goes into it here, but you're walking around a little bit more, you're moving around a little bit more. Just keep on moving, right? And Larry, yeah, I mean, like if your heart rate is higher, you're burning more calories. The issue is like, you can only go at a higher heart rate for a certain period of time, right? So there's inverse relationship between intensity and time. But be that as it may, a higher heart rate during exercise is relevant. I wouldn't necessarily just want a higher resting heart rate, if that makes sense. Sue, hey, how's it going? Being recorded? Yes. And we will post this as soon as we're done, okay? All right, now, recap. I'm gonna read from my notes here because it's important. So if you haven't been taking notes, here's the time to take notes. To recap, so far we have several actionable steps when it comes to boosting a sluggish metabolism. Increase your physical activity. I don't care, just whatever it is, increase your physical activity. But more specifically, make sure that you're lifting weights to build or maintain muscle. Okay. Number 3, incorporate some low, moderate, and or high intensity aerobic conditioning. Again, that's going to pull that lever, that physical activity lever, right? Bake some exercise snacks into your day, all right? All those things are designed to increase that physical activity piece. And you also want to increase your spontaneous activity, your NEAT, which may not be so spontaneous at first, like we talked about, okay? So increase physical activity through resistance training, through aerobic training, taking walks, whatever it is, exercise snacks, and NEAT. All of those things. optimize your protein intake. At least 0.7 grams per pound of body weight per day, right? Make sure that you've got a great protein supplement like BioTRUST Low Carb Light to help you get there, okay? And then supplement smart, right? This is all to help with muscle mass, maintain that muscle mass, which is the biggest piece of combating that and boosting that sluggish metabolism. Ageless Muscle, we've got Omega Krill, we got Soul Joy. So that's really helping indirectly boost that sluggish metabolism, but there's also supplements out there that can directly or purportedly directly boost metabolism, right? And so, well, David, good question. Is there a pill that takes hunger away? We might talk about that a little bit. Let's see. Michelle, exercise too hard raises your cortisol and affect your weight. Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, Michelle, I think that's a little bit overstated. During exercise, cortisol levels are going to be elevated, and that's important because cortisol is a hormone that helps liberate fat and glucose from stored tissues so that we can use them for energy. Yeah, Steve, MetaboBoost, we're about to get to that one. Yeah, right on. So, during exercise, it's actually relevant and important for cortisol to elevate, right? But then we want to make sure that it comes back down after exercise. So various stress management techniques can be helpful over time to get it back to where it's needed. Now, if you have issues with stress management, if you have issues with cortisol overall, then maybe watching the intensity of exercise, the duration of exercise may be an important piece of the puzzle. But overall, you don't want to shy away from having high cortisol during exercise. In fact, it's very important. So I hope that's helpful. But we do need to look at that on an individual basis sometimes. Okay? So good question. As far as, Connie, your question about 0.7 grams per current body weight or desired body weight, I'd probably just go with current for now, Connie. And it depends on like how far off you are from your desired body weight. But I would just general rule of thumb, 0.7 grams per current body weight. Again, it depends. Like ideally, it would probably be 0.7 grams of protein per pound of current lean body mass, but we might be splitting hairs there at some point. Just being in that range, right? 0.5 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, somewhere in that range is probably going to be better than where most people are. So I hope that helps. Okay, speaking of supplementation, right? There's no shortage of supplements out there, metabolism boosters, fat burners that make highfalutin promises, many of which are not kept, right? Many of us are left disappointed, frustrated, if not altogether mad at products that haven't helped us achieve our goals and help us, achieve the promises that we've been led to believe, okay? So we know how frustrating that is. We also know how challenging weight loss can be and how difficult it can be to deal with the sluggish metabolism. And so that's exactly why we formulated MetaboBoost. You guys alluded to it earlier. So MetaboBoost is something I want to talk about today. So this is formulated with a combination of clinically backed ingredients like Sinitrol and Chromax. There's berberine in there as well. It's really, really focused on both sides of the equation, the fat loss equation or the weight loss equation, which generally are defined as burn more calories and eat less calories. Okay, that's oversimplified, right? It's move more, eat less. That's basically the same thing. Burn more calories, eat less. That's super, super simple advice, but it's not that easy. We know that. So MetaboBoost formulated to address both ends of the equation, increasing metabolism as well as helping with food intake or helping control appetite to some degree. It's stronger on the metabolism side of the piece, right? Of the equation. It's really, really focused on boosting that, increasing fat burning, so on and so forth, while also being a strong, player on the appetite management side of it. So, MetaboBoost formulated with multiple clinical clinically backed ingredients. Excuse me. Multiple clinically backed ingredients. Like I said, Sinatrol and Chromax. For instance, Sinatrol, more than 10 years of research has gone into it, 5 clinical studies. It's a fat burner. It's a metabolism booster. It works through fat shredding technology. It's got a combination of polyphenols. I think you mentioned it, Larry. There's some guarana in there. Just so you know, we'll get into it in just a moment, but there's a very small amount of caffeine, 20 to 25 milligrams of caffeine per serving. Very small amount, just enough to, help facilitate some of those fat burning pathways, and then also, give you a little boost of subjective energy, okay? So, it is working predominantly through its activities at the cellular level. So, when we think about fat, body fat, it's white. These cells are white. This fat tissue is white for the most part. The subcutaneous fat that we're trying to lose, because it is storing fat. It's a storage depot for fat. Well, this Sinatrol ingredient has been shown to kind of change the behavior of fat cells and make them less of a storage depot and more of an energy burning or a heat producing energy factory, so to speak. So it turns them brown or beiges them essentially. And so there was a question about mitochondria too. It's a great question. So the idea here is that it's going to boost metabolism by making fat cells behave differently. So instead of being fat storage depots, they're fat burning depots. Okay, so brown adipose tissue is something that you might be familiar with. It's turning these fat cells brown, and they become heat producing, energy burning fat cells, right? Steve, good question. So taking Metaboboost before or after exercise really doesn't really matter too much. Personally, I think that it's a nice little tool to have before exercise because of that little bit of caffeine in there. As far as like the fat burning, metabolism boosting effect, it's not, that wouldn't necessarily be relevant to the exercise piece. That comes over time with continued use. So your fat burning machinery is going to be upregulated in general as you take it, and but the caffeine piece might be helpful to increase the subjective effort you're able to put forth, the exercise intensity, things like that. So I actually like it as a little pre-exercise boost. Teresa, great question. You said maybe you spoke to menopausal women, how this affects energy, sleep, weight loss. Future discussion. Yeah, future discussion for sure, Teresa. That is very, very relevant. We can definitely get into that. Okay, so hopefully that helps there, Steve. So what Sinatrol is ultimately doing is it's increasing metabolic rate. Okay, that's one thing that it's doing. And what we'll get into in just a moment is that studies show that Sinatrol can increase metabolic rate by 180 calories per day, up to 180 calories per day, which essentially is, counteracting what a decade can do to you, right? Audrey, good question. Do you have to take Metaboboost with a meal? It does not have to be taken with a meal. You can take it with a meal, but does not have to be taken with a meal, right? So, Sinatrol, one thing it's doing is basically increasing metabolic rate. Now, the other thing that it's doing is it's increasing fat breakdown, lipolysis, and fat burning, fat oxidation. So it's not only increasing metabolic rate, it's increasing the fat burning piece of it, the puzzle, right? Which is what you want to do. Great question, Princess IC5 belly trim. We'll get into those in just a moment too, okay? So Sinatrol is not only increasing metabolic rate by this 180 calories per day, but it's basically meeting that need through increased fat burning, which is what you want, right? And so Sinatrol is doing that. Chromax is a patented, clinically backed form of chromium that has been the subject of 36 studies. It's multiple patents, and it's been shown to improve body composition, some things that we'll get into. It helps with blood sugar metabolism, body composition, appetite and craving management, and so on. Yeah, Larry, Metaboboost, maybe not at the end of the day for most people, right? Like probably not, for many people, probably not using much caffeine, if any, after say 4 p.m. So it's probably good to have sometime in the morning or the afternoon, but maybe not at bedtime. Good call, Larry. Thank you. The third leg of the stool for MetaboBoost is berberine. I think more and more people are familiar with berberine these days. It helps with blood sugar metabolism. It also may have an effect on GLP-1, which more and more people are becoming familiar with. GLP-1 is a satiety hormone, basically tells the brain that you're full. So berberine may be helping out there. So that's berberine. Chromax seem to be helping from MetaboBoost standpoint on the appetite management side of the equation. MetaboBoost is really hammering that metabolism side of the equation. A few highlights on these clinically backed ingredients in MetaboBoost. So Sinatrol, one study, 12-week study, showed that there was actually this was an 8-week study, showed that there was a 10 times greater reduction in body fat percentage compared to placebo. So a 10x improvement in body composition. Another 8-week study showed that there was a 7 times greater reduction in body weight with Sinatrol, so MetaboBoost, compared to placebo. In this case, they were both dieting, and the group that took the Sinatrol got 7 times greater weight loss results. So awesome weight loss results. And then, like I mentioned, we saw a 10% increase in metabolism with Sinatrol supplementation, up to 180 calories per day increase in metabolic rate with Sinatrol. And that was documented after taking the supplement for 12 or 16 weeks. So after the people had lost weight, which we typically see a metabolic decline, they had actually increased their metabolism. Fascinating. Okay, on Chromax, in one study, participants taking Chromax for 72 days lost over 9 times more body fat compared to the placebo. They also increased their lean body mass. We're going to get into that in just a second. Another study, participants taking Chromax for 8 weeks reduced their average daily caloric intake by over 300 calories. Okay, so a lot of great data points here on Sinatrol and Chromax for improving body weight, better weight loss results when dieting, appetite management, better body composition. This is a super important point that I want to point out here. Quality weight loss. So with both Sinatrol and Chromax, what we see in all the studies, many studies on body composition with these ingredients in MetaboBoost, is they're not just losing weight, they're losing fat. And they're not just losing fat, they're either maintaining or gaining lean muscle mass. So if you rewind all the way back to the first half of this whole discussion, we talked about the most important thing you can do to combat a sluggish metabolism, to boost a sluggish metabolism, is to maintain or build your lean muscle mass. Well, Sinatrol and Chromax are doing that very same thing while also promoting a decrease in fat mass. That's quality weight loss. We don't want to just lose weight, we want to lose fat, and we want to maintain or build muscle mass. It's super important. We already talked about how losing muscle can be detrimental to our metabolism. Guys, when you just diet and you're not exercising, you're not consuming enough protein, and you just diet to lose weight, about at least 10% of that weight is probably going to be lean muscle mass. So we're going to see a decline in metabolic rate. Now, some of the latest figures that we're seeing with some of these popular methods, these popular and quick methods for weight loss, up to, if you're reading between the lines, maybe you know what I'm talking about here, up to 40% of the weight being lost by people who are using these very popular methods of weight loss these days, up to 40% of the weight being lost is lean muscle mass. Guys, they're setting themselves up for failure in the long term. That is a recipe for metabolic slowdown, for weight regain. Okay, so cool thing about Sinatrol and Chromax, aka MetaboBoost, is that we're not only boosting metabolism, boosting fat burning, and accelerating weight loss, we are gaining muscle, if not maintaining, if not gaining muscle. Giant, can you lose weight and gain muscle at the same time? It sure seems like it. That's what the data says on Chromax. That's what the data says on Sinatrol. If you combine MetaboBoost with an optimal protein intake, with ageless muscle, low carb, basically, here, put it differently, not that you need every supplement under the sun, but MetaboBoost plus resistance training plus optimizing your protein intake. Start there. I feel very strongly that you can lose fat and gain muscle at the same time. Now, is it going to be like earth shattering overnight, lose 20 pounds? No. But over the course of 12 weeks, it's going to be 8 pounds of fat loss, maybe a couple pounds of lean muscle mass gain, which is very, very sustainable and also appreciable, and makes a huge difference. Okay? Des, is it safe to combine MetaboBoost with other fat burners? Generally speaking, we would just say not. I can't really speak to other products out there, Des. So I don't know what the ingredients are in other fat burners. There's such a variety of them out there. They would be very, very difficult to answer that question. So in general, I would say no. And I can't really speak to that. There's a lot of other junk out there. Shouldn't say it that way. There's a lot of other products out there. I don't know enough about the formulation or the quality testing that goes into it, so on and so forth. So I will say that we've got MetaboBoost, we've got Belly Trim, we've got IC5, and then upcoming here in the future, we've got some more options I think that people are gonna love. Prisma, got here late. What are the top 3 products you recommend? So as it relates to this discussion, boosting a sluggish metabolism, and promoting quality weight loss, we're going to talk about MetaboBoost. We got to talk about, let's see what Coach Christina said. That's a pretty good trifecta there. BioTRUST low carb or low carb light, so protein intake. And then from there, you have your pick of the litter. Maybe it's Ageless Muscle, maybe it's Belly Trim or IC5, maybe it's Omega Krill, so on and so forth. So the top 3 for what we've talked about today, Prisma, would probably be MetaboBoost, Ageless Muscle, and low carb or low carb light, based on what we've talked about. So, and we're gonna post this when we're all done, so you can come back and watch it from the beginning if you want. Okay, so to get to a few questions, does MetaboBoost contain caffeine? We already talked about that. About 20 to 25 milligrams per serving per day, and to put in perspective, cup of coffee is somewhere around 100 milligrams. Cup of green tea is probably half of that. So it's not very much, but it's enough, I think, to have this little bit of subjective boost where it feels pretty good. Andrea, I take MetaboBoost. Do I need Belly Trim? Take Ageless Muscle too. Cool. You're doing awesome, Andrea. MetaboBoost, Ageless Muscle is a awesome combination. Okay, so let's get into this. What's the difference between Belly Trim and MetaboBoost? Do I need both? And yeah, you're on the right track, Prisma. You don't necessarily need both. They work through, they're both designed to help with your weight loss journey, and they work through complementary mechanisms. So we've already talked about how MetaboBoost works. So on one hand, Chromax, berberine, they're probably going to help on that appetite management side of the equation. They're going to help with, carbohydrate cravings. They're going to help with reducing caloric intake. That's what we see in the data, okay? But Sinitrol is working on boosting metabolism. We see an increase up to 180 calories per day by an increase. Okay, so that's how MetaboBoost is. Belly Trim is working very specifically on a couple different angles. So first of all, it seems to be working on the fat metabolism side of it. And in particular, what it's doing is it's increasing the activity of enzymes involved in the burning of fat. So it's complementary to MetaboBoost in that sense. So it's going to help with increasing your body's utilization of fat for fuel to meet that increased metabolic demand. And on the other hand, it's also it can also inhibit enzymes involved in fat storage. So there's some complementary mechanisms at play. Invariably with supplementation with CLA, which is the main ingredient in Belly Trim XP, we see improvements in body composition. So there does seem to be some preferential nutrient partitioning where the body does a better job of building lean tissue and reducing fat tissue. So do you have to use both? No, but can they be used complementary? Yes. So they can be used together, but they don't have to be. So I hope that helps, guys, on the difference between Belly Trim and MetaboBoost. Both can be used for that quality weight loss piece that we've already talked about. IC5, meanwhile, we haven't talked too much about the carbohydrate metabolism. So, You're welcome, Andrea. Thank you for the great question, being patient with me as well. IC5 is working more on the carbohydrate metabolism piece, blood sugar metabolism, promoting healthy, blood sugar levels, helping maintain healthy blood sugar levels, helping on the insulin sensitivity side. Very, very beneficial from that standpoint, because IC5 is a magnificent supplement, if you ask me. It helps with acute blood sugar regulation or management. May also have some carbohydrate enzyme activity, inhibition activity, where your body maybe reduces its absorption of those and reduces some of its calories from carbs. But super helpful in stabilizing or maintaining more stable blood sugar levels, which can be helpful from an appetite standpoint, can be helpful from a fat burning standpoint, can be helpful from an energy standpoint, and an overall metabolic flexibility or metabolic health standpoint. Okay, let's see. So Steve said, I've been intermittent fasting for 1 month and lost 6 pounds. I seem to have hit a plateau and not lost any more weight. Yeah, let's give Steve, let's give MetaboBoost a try. One application that I did not talk about with MetaboBoost is Metabolic for about 8 weeks, okay, before you judge it at all. Okay, so that's what we see in the Sinatrol studies, the Chromax studies, is that many of the results are measured about 8 weeks. Okay, so let's give it a chance. Let's give it a try. I think that's a good. Now, if you don't see, even though I'm saying let's plan to stick with it for 8 weeks, let's see where you're at in 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, we should see, if we're at a plateau, we want to see some changes, in 2 to 4 weeks. May not be huge, but let's see where we're at. Sound good, Steve? I think you just implemented that. Let's see where you're at. Also, if you're exercising, Steve, let's not forget to progress. Okay, so the same thing, if you're doing the same thing that got you to where you are, that may not be enough to get you to the next level. Okay, so remember, take into consideration all the things we've already said today. Make sure you're resistance training. Make sure that you increase your overall physical activity levels. Make sure you've got exercise snacks baked into the day. Make sure you've got some more NEAT going on, some things like that. Larry, Oura Ring, yes sir. I've had a Oura Ring now for, gosh, I don't know how long, 6 years, something like that. So maybe not quite that long, 4 years. But yeah, I do love it. Okay. Jackie, you don't think you have a large metabolic rate? Jackie, you need to go back and check this out from the beginning. We'll post it. I think we got some tools in the toolbox to help you out. Steve asked, should you keep intermittent fasting? Yeah. I don't have a problem with it as long as you're doing okay with it. Like we talked about, if you're trying to lose fat from a nutritional standpoint, make sure you're taking enough protein. But we need to have some boundary or some restriction. So you can either specifically restrict calories. I don't personally like that approach, but some people say they need a calorie target and they got to hit it. You can restrict calories. You can restrict food groups. An example there would be like a keto diet where you restrict your carbohydrate intake, or a carnivore diet where you've got clear boundaries. Or a third thing, and you can combine some of these, is you can do intermittent fasting. You just restrict the time of it, okay? So especially for guys, I think the intermittent fasting is a great tool. Maybe not for everybody, but I like it personally. So if it's working okay for you, keep it up. And we'll go from there. It might not hurt, Steve, too, if I don't know how hard you've been quote unquote dieting, but mixing in a little bit of a break for a week or two where you just back off just for a little bit can actually be helpful in the long run. We see there's a study called the Matador study. There's been several others where they have these short diet breaks, and like a week, maybe 2 weeks, where you go back up to maintenance level, and then you go back into a reduced calorie approach. And over time, we see that tends to lead to greater fat loss, better lean muscle mass maintenance, and an overall better maintenance of metabolic rate. I didn't get into that one today. I probably should have, but that's a nice tool in the toolbox from a nutrition standpoint, is to periodically, like, I think YouTube's trying to kick me out. So that's twice now that they have told me that I'm having trouble connecting here. So we're at about an hour here. I think we've done some good work here. I hope that you've got some good application out of this. If we missed your question, you can email us at coaches@biotrust.com. We'll take care of you there. Coach Christina, I want to thank you. You've done a marvelous job managing so many questions and comments. Amazing content. Guys, go back through the chat here. Coach Christina has literally put together an epic library of great tools here. Andrea will post this YouTube live thank you, Larry. Thank you so much for being here, for your participation. Jose, thank you so much. Everybody who's shown up, thank you guys all for being here. We appreciate you so much. We're going to post this afterwards, and you can catch it here on YouTube. You can watch from the beginning. You'll be able to, do all the different things where you pause it, timestamp, whatever. You can go through the comments, all that good stuff. Again, you can email us at coaches@biotrust.com. Go over to the VIP group. That's Coach Christina's. You're welcome, Des. Thank you, my friend. Coach Christina runs the VIP Facebook group. That's at biotrust.com/VIP. That's a magnificent place where you can see many of these same faces, and you can get accountability, social support, motivation, inspiration, all the good stuff. And Steve, what's the offer on MetaboBoost? We'll get that here to you too. Coach Christina, maybe you could repost that coupon code for people who are here. Thank you so much. Thank YouTube 50. Thank you, Christina. YouTube 50 is the coupon code. You get that discount, and that will be awesome to use for you guys today. So hope you found value out of this. Like I said, we'll post it again. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for participation. We appreciate you guys so much, and we'll do it again. All right? Take care, guys.